Cool. Good morning. That's good. Just a quick service announcement before we begin. Grace, we all decided last week that you are not allowed to go on vacation over the weekend without giving us prior notice. None of us want to be responsible for waking ourselves up on a Sunday morning, so. Last week, Adam preached out of Jeremiah 29 about the Israelites living in exile in Babylon. And if my memory serves me correctly, I think the week before that, that was part of your message as well. So here we go again. Jeremiah 29, verse 4. This is what we've been kind of kicking around here for a couple weeks right now. I'm just going to read it again, and then we'll get into it. This is what the Lord Almighty, the God of Israel, says to those I carried into exile from Jerusalem to Babylon. Build houses and settle down. Plant gardens and eat what they produce. Marry and have sons and daughters. Find wives for your sons and give your daughters in marriage so that they too may have sons and daughters. Increase in number there. Do not decrease. Also seek the peace and prosperity of the city to which I have carried you into exile. Pray to the Lord for it, because if it prospers, you will prosper too. Yes, this is what the Lord Almighty, the God of Israel, says. Do not let the prophets and diviners among you deceive you. Do not listen to the dreams you encourage them to have. They are prophesying lies to you in my name. I have not sent them, declares the Lord. So I don't know why these verses are stuck in our collective heads right now, but it is worth spending some time thinking about that. We've been on this particular section of verses for 3 weeks now, and I can't believe that that's entirely an accident. I'm a big fan of these verses. I've been thinking about them all week. I think it's just the season that I'm in right now. We moved into our house about 18 months ago, and I think we have done a lot in our new place in the amount of time that we've been there. We have an orchard, we have a playground, we have a fire pit where some awesome conversations have been had. I've hung coat racks, cut down trees, fixed just about every appliance in the house. We have chickens, we've transplanted bushes and talked and dreamed and planned and hoped. I work with someone who seems to never fail to point out the world's failures. They are very quick to remind us of the judgment that God is bringing on the earth, of revelation, of the end of times, famine, plague, disaster. And it makes me angry. It shouldn't. They aren't wrong. Everything they say will happen, the Bible also says will happen. And there have been many plain old ordinary famines, plagues, and disasters that didn't herald the apocalypse, but would have been just as devastating for me to experience. Some of them, like the Israelites' exile into Babylon, were the judgment of God. I think it makes me angry because I have kids now. The judgment of the Almighty doesn't seem like the type of thing I want them to have to witness. So in my heart, I beg for grace. In my heart, I hope and pray that the news we hear is just the news of ordinary life and not a trend towards something worse. In my heart, I claim these verses in Jeremiah. So I was living pretty good the beginning of this week. I was thinking about how good and right it is to invest in the life that we are building here, to invest in this community, to invest in my house across the street. Heaven was a conversation that seemed to be for another week, and eternity seemed like too big of a topic for me to dwell on. So I brought my eyes way, way down to the work. This is easy for me. In my life, both farming and youth ministry have taught me a simple lesson. Do the work. Show up. All the planning, the hypothesizing, the boardrooms, and the committee meetings are the easy part. I can't count the number of people who said they wanted to help with youth group, or the amount of people that criticized our prices because of how easy it is to grow lettuce. Philosophically, they were both right. They only lacked one thing. They didn't do the work. I've learned that growing kids and growing plants have a lot of similarities. The hardest part is knowing where to look. You can't look at them because it's hard to see their growth if that's what you are focusing on. But you can't look away, or all of a sudden he's negotiating for more time outside to play like he's some sort of high-caliber trial lawyer. But my old neighbor used to say that after a thunderstorm on a July evening, if you walk through a cornfield at around 10 o'clock the next morning, you can hear the corn grow. I love the work. It almost doesn't matter what the work is. I'm currently digging an 18-inch wide by 3-foot deep tunnel under my workshop. It's miserable. I crawl on my hands and knees with a headlamp strapped to my face and a hammer drill in one hand. I jackhammer the dirt face of the tunnel until I can't see or breathe, whichever comes first. Then I crawl out backwards and switch out the hammer drill for a rake. I crawl back in and pull the dirt out to where I can shovel it out of the ditch and onto the pile. I can't Tom Sawyer this thing. It sucks. And for some reason, I love it. So Adam's sermon last week was perfect. It made me feel right. Like, this is the life I should be living. This is what I should be doing. This is where I should be. And then on Wednesday, while I was taking a break from playing the gopher on Winnie the Pooh, I watched a video of a convenience store worker getting shot in the back. He was sitting on the ground, and his assailant was robbing his livelihood. It was casual, it was merciless, it was horrific, and it's given me nightmares. He wasn't acting like a fool. He was calm. He was cool. He wasn't a hero. He did what the thief told him to do, and after taking his money, on his way out, the guy just casually shot him in the back. The tagline said that he died. I have no idea if that's true. For all I know, this clip could be 6 years old. I don't have the context. What I do have is an image burned in my mind of a kind of calloused evil that makes me afraid. It ruined my perspective. No matter how good a life I craft, no matter how peaceful my community may seem, there are things that are outside my control. And it doesn't seem to be enough for me to simply build and sow and reap. And so my mind went from the sermon that Adam had just preached to one I preached about a year ago. I'm not sure if we are an old enough church for a greatest hits album, but I also think that it's valuable to come back to places we've been before to see how our perspective has changed and to see what remains constant. Genesis chapter 18, verse 1. The Lord appeared to Abraham near the great tree of Mamre while he was sitting at the entrance to his tent in the heat of the day. So what I want to tell is this story, this parable, but it has all the hallmarks of a Michael Bay blockbuster. Say that 10 times fast. If that were the case, this would be the cutscene between the opening credits where Abraham is sitting in his tent with a couple of strangers walking by. Many of you will recognize this meeting of Abraham. This is where God tells Abraham that he's going to have a child, and Sarah is overhearing, and she laughs, and she gets kind of rebuked for that. But something else happens during that meeting, or rather at the very end of that meeting when Abraham is escorting the men away. Genesis chapter 18, verse 16 says, when the men got up to leave, they looked down towards Sodom, and Abraham walked along with them to see them on their way. Then the Lord said, shall I hide from Abraham what I am about to do? Abraham will surely become a great and powerful nation, and all nations on the earth will be blessed through him. For I have chosen him so that he will direct his children and his household after him to keep the way of the Lord by doing what is right and just, so that the Lord will bring about for Abraham what he has promised him. So Abraham meets these three guys, one of whom refers to himself as the Lord. And as the four of them are walking along, the Lord is consulting with the other two, trying to decide how much he should divulge to Abraham about his future plans. In the end, he decides it's important that Abraham know what God is planning to do. So we jump down to verse 20. Then the Lord said, "The outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah is so great, and their sin so grievous, that I will go down and see if what they have done is as bad as the outcry that has reached me. If not, I will know." The men turned away and went toward Sodom, but Abraham remained standing before the Lord. Then Abraham approached him and said, "Will you sweep away the righteous with the wicked? What if there are 50 righteous people in the city? Will you really sweep it away and not spare the place for the sake of the 50 righteous people in it? Far be it from you to do such a thing, to kill the righteous with the wicked, treating the righteous and the wicked alike. Far be it from you. Will not the judge of all the earth do right?" The Lord said, "If I find 50 righteous people in the city of Sodom, I will spare the whole place for their sake." Then Abraham spoke up again. "Now that I have been so bold as to speak to the Lord, though I am nothing but dust and ashes, what if the number of the righteous is 5 less than 50? Will you destroy the whole city for lack of 5 people? If I find 45 there," he said, "I will not destroy it." Once again he spoke to him. "What if only 40 are found there?" And he said, "For the sake of 40, I will not do it." And then he said, "May the Lord not be angry, but let me speak. What if only 30 can be found there?" He answered, "I will not do it if I find 30 there." Abraham said, "Now that I have been so bold as to speak to the Lord, what if only 20 can be found there?" He said, "For the sake of 20, I will not destroy it." And then he said, "May the Lord not be angry, but let me speak just once more. What if only 10 can be found there? For the sake of 10, I will not destroy it." When the Lord had finished speaking with Abraham, he left, and Abraham returned home. Most of us know what Abraham was doing. We've played this game before. I doubt most of us would be able to do it as well as Abraham, but most of us know how to sweet talk a couple bucks off of whatever it is that we're trying to buy. But this isn't local sports memorabilia or hot pads or Barbies. These are the lives of an entire nation. I'm amazed also at Abraham's response. It's not exactly like he and the rulers of Sodom are friends. The kings of Sodom were part of a regional rebellion that led to the capture of Abraham's nephew. When Abraham returned with Lot, his nephew, and all the possessions of Sodom, his words with the king of Sodom were cold. He disapproved of Sodom and its neighbor Gomorrah. They were wicked, and he knew it. Perhaps he begged for mercy on their behalf only for his nephew, who he knew was still living in the city. I believe that Abraham knew what the cost of God's judgment would be, and he pleaded with God to stay his hand. It seems we Christians in modern America have a harder time with this than some of the Old Testament prophets did. Maybe we are less familiar with what God's judgment looks like. Maybe we are naive to what the wrath of God actually means. But to Abraham, the thought of God punishing his people must have been real enough that even the people of Sodom and Gomorrah seemed worthy of mercy. Flash forward to the main event. The two angels arrived at, this is Genesis 19, verse 1. The two angels arrived at Sodom in the evening, and Lot was sitting in the gateway of the city. When he saw them, he got up to meet them and bowed down with his face to the ground. "My lords," he said, "please turn aside at your servant's house. You can wash your feet and spend the night, and then go on your way in the early morning." But he insisted so strongly that they did go with him and entered his house. He prepared a meal for them, baking bread without yeast, and they ate. Before they had gone to bed, all the men of every part of the city of Sodom, both young and old, surrounded the house. They called to Lot, "Where are the men who came to you tonight? Bring them out to us so we can have sex with them." The men of Sodom wished evil upon the strangers who entered their city, and Lot stood in their way. And as a kid, I heard the story of Sodom and Gomorrah and Lot as a lesson in what happens if you flirt with evil. Lot lived surrounded by wickedness. It seems he chose that lifestyle, at first because the pastures surrounding Sodom were more fertile than the desert where Abraham chose to live. But somewhere along the way, it seems he gave up the life of a wanderer and ended up living in the city. The analogy growing up was always that this is how sin, particularly sins involving greed and prosperity, can lure you in. But when I read this as an adult, like so many of the stories I come back to, I saw something different. Lot was sitting at the gate. I don't think it's a coincidence. I think Lot had a ministry. I think Lot sat at the gates of hell and snatched the innocent from the jaws of evil. I think it was on purpose. I don't think he was on his way home from poker night and just happened to see two tired travelers and offered them a place to stay. I think Lot put himself in just such a place so that he could protect the ignorant from the worst predations of the city. Why Lot was living there, I don't know. Maybe he shouldn't have been. But of two things I am fairly certain. One, there were not 10 righteous men in Sodom. And two, Lot was a righteous man. The story of Lot doesn't necessarily end with a happily ever after. But unlike most Michael Bay movies, there is a point beyond the action and the explosions. Genesis 19:15. With the coming of dawn, the angels urged Lot, saying, "Hurry, take your wife and your 2 daughters who are here, or you will be swept away when the city is punished." When he hesitated, the men grasped his hand and the hands of his wife and his 2 daughters, and led them safely out of the city, for the Lord was merciful to them. As soon as they had brought them out, one of them said, "Flee for your lives. Don't look back, and don't stop anywhere in the plain. Flee to the mountains, or you will be swept away." We know how Sodom and Gomorrah turned out. But I'll leave you with 3 thoughts. If, like me, you steal glances at the sky, waiting for fire bolts or lightning strikes or meteors, if you wonder what our calling is in the midst of what appears to be so much evil, if you have no response to those that call our country the next Sodom and Gomorrah, take up your courage. There are enough of us in this room to save America. I genuinely believe that God would have honored his agreement with Abraham for the sake of 10 righteous people. God would have spared the whole nation. 2, our calling is clear. We stand at the gates and save the innocent. That will look vastly different for each of us, but I pray that we support each other as we find a way to stand in the gap for the ones around us that need us. 3, God will not abandon us to the judgments he has prepared for the wicked. The story of salvation is the story of us claiming grace we do not deserve. As ominous as the clouds may look, he will not forget us. So many things about following Christ seem to be like walking a razor's edge. This is no different. This place is not our home. We are merely passing through. But we are called to live in the world while we are here. So I'm going to keep digging my tunnel. And we're going to keep gathering here on Sundays. And we're going to sow. And we're going to reap. And we're going to get married. And we're going to have babies. And we're going to live here on this earth, in this country. And we are going to go to the gates in the evening and pull people out of the jaws of death. Genesis 19:27. Early the next morning, Abraham got up and returned to the place where he had stood before the Lord. He looked down toward Sodom and Gomorrah, toward all the land of the plain, and he saw dense smoke rising from the land, like smoke from a furnace. So when God destroyed the cities of the plain, he remembered Abraham, and he brought Lot out of the catastrophe that overthrew the cities where Lot had lived. Let's pray.